I turned 36 this month. That marks 21 years of training for me. And I'm not talking about training on and off during that time. I'm talking about one long extended training block that was 21 years long with the same goal. Now, that's not something I'm saying to brag, but it's to make a point that I've trained my ass off in my early teens, from having just gone through puberty to having very little life stress, to training in my 20s with peak optimal hormone levels, optimized recovery ability, and to training just as hard in my late 20s, early and mid 30s, where now I've got bigger priorities in life than just training and myself. A family, a business, that also comes with the aches and pains, and lots of mileage and wear and tear on my body from the years and years of heavy and hard training. Now, not to mention the natural decline in recovery ability, and obviously the other age-related hormone shifts. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not gonna sit here and start saying, oh, you can't build muscle and burn fat once you get over your 30s. That's bullshit. That's a complete cop-out. That's really just what soft people say when they're not willing to put in the work. But as someone who has been training for 21 years, and someone that's been coaching competitive athletes for over 10, I am telling you that the approach to build muscle at 35 plus, it comes with a lot of additional factors to consider that don't really apply to young guys. This is very real, and personally I am living it firsthand, as I'm still trying to eke out progress at 36. But now, I still see the same thing every single week. I see guys hitting 35 plus or older, and wondering why that same training that got them jacked in college is not paying off for them anymore. It's now leaving them tired, injured, fatigued, and just overall frustrated in their progress. And if that's you, your joints probably hate you. Your body is probably chronically beat up. And if you've been training for as long as I have, and you're still using that same approach that worked well for you back in the day, probably wondering why you don't look the same anymore. Now, we're all guilty of it. Our egos just don't want to admit that we're playing a different ball game now. I personally had my reality check this year. I returned to competitive bodybuilding for the first time in 15 years. In my teens and my 20s, I lived and breathed competition. My mentality was simple: nobody would outwork me. And as a natural result, I constantly showed up to competitions the leanest in my class. And in my teens, I had muscle mass that a lot of guys didn't acquire until their mid-early 20s and 30s. Every session in the gym, I trained relentlessly, even if that meant I crawled out of the gym. It didn't matter if I needed a full week to recover after one single session. I put myself through extreme hunger all the time. I did tons and tons of high-intensity cardio. And objectively, I really don't believe at that time that I ever met anyone that was willing to go the same distance that I was in bodybuilding. And that mentality, it served me very well at the time. Now, this past year at 35, I turned it back on. But I'll tell you what, my body reminded me quickly that that behavior no longer serves us anymore. And the reality is that there's quite a few things that I had to do differently, and things that I will continue to do from here on out. And here's 3 things that are just no longer on the table for me at 35 plus. The first one is, if a movement causes any type of discomfort, it's off the table. No questions asked. Barbell squats and conventional deadlifts, they were staples in my training early on. I got great results for them. Big compound movements focused on heavy weights and progression. But I took things excessively. I'd barbell back squat as heavy as I could 2 or 3 times per week for years at a time. I mean, I'm talking like 10 years straight. Now, personally, I never had elite strength on these movements, but I was regularly barbell squatting 4 plates 3 times per week. I was doing so at a body weight of sub 200 pounds. Now, here's the thing. I'd rack up wear and tear. I'd get some knee pain, some lower back pain. My IT bands would get inflamed. I might have a session where I'd stretch or overstrain my adductors. But at that time, the only thing that mattered was, can I recover from that in enough time to do my next session? Now, for years, I got away with this. I was in a constant state of fatigue. My recovery came down to something simple. Can I train hard enough next session? No, I'm not gonna lie. I grew great doing this, but the fact is, I was just getting away with doing this. And at some point, for everyone, that stops happening. At 36 now, if I rack up those aches and pains, what used to be something that I might recover from in 3 to 4 days, now might take 1 to 2 weeks. If I start to string together a few sessions week to week where exercises start to bother my joints and cause aches and pains, it no longer just heals and then I get right back to it. It actually ends up making that movement more and more fatiguing to my body and less growth producing over time. The fact is, powering through those aches and pains as a teen, a kid, or in my early 20s, it got me what I wanted. But now, at 36, that's the exact thing that's gonna actually prevent me from getting to where I wanna be. If my knees are hurting me from squatting and I continue to squat, In a few weeks, I'll find myself in a position where I can't even train my entire lower body because everything hurts. Doesn't matter if it's any movement, because my knees are now just so banged up. So here's the takeaway here. If a movement causes any level of discomfort, just scratch it. There's no must-do exercise in bodybuilding. And even if one movement is fundamentally better than another, the one that you could actually do pain-free for long periods of time, that's gonna build a lot more muscle if you could do it consistently, especially compared to the one that just constantly beats you up and then forces you to take time off of the gym, or simply just go through the motions for a few weeks. Now, some examples of this from me. First one is simple, no more barbell back squats. Personally, that movement just loads my spine too much. Now, I might get away with it for a few weeks, but if I keep that up long enough, there's always some small tweaks or aches and pains that set in. What happens is, those end up setting me back a few days. Now, personally, if I am barbell squatting at this point, I'm using a safety squat bar. Now next, if I'm doing something like a hack squat or a machine squat variation, when this causes me any knee pain, it's an absolute no-go. Hack squats are notorious for causing a bit of knee pain. Now, if I find a good hack squat machine in the gym that feels good, I'll roll with it. But honestly, that's very few and far between, especially at this stage. Personally, pendulum squats are my favorite quad machine. So at the moment, I prioritize these. This allows me to keep training hard still, without the wear and tear that something like a barbell squat will cause on my knees. Now, for things like back, hamstrings, the posterior chain, I won't do any hip hinges at the beginning of my training sessions anymore. Things like RDLs, barbell rows, T-bar rows, these are all my bread and butter back movements early on. I always train them first. I always train them as hard and as heavy as possible while I was fresh. Now, while this does load the muscle very well, but I've also gotten extremely strong on these movements where it does require my back, my hips, my knees, my hamstrings, all to be super warmed up to do it properly. I have to be mobile and ready to handle those kind of weights now. The amount of weight that's on the bar also does increase the injury risk quite a bit. There's a big difference when I'm able to row 300 plus pounds than when I was rowing maybe a plate in the gym. There's a difference from when I'm doing hip hinges with 400 to 500 pounds and I was doing 1 to 2 plates. Again, I'm 36 and I have 21 years of mileage and wear and tear on my physique. So personally, I have to be very careful with this. One little tweak, one little injury, it's gonna set me back months or maybe even years. Think about it like this. Any additional benefit I might get from doing them first or going super heavy, it's nowhere near worth the risk of that additional setback. So personally, I now place all of these movements last in my training session. This ensures that every single muscle is already warm and ready to go by the time I get up to it. So I don't need much warm-up time, which is also an additional bonus. And now the load I use goes down quite a bit as well, but this allows me to also still keep the intensity as high. It's kind of like a built-in safety protocol. The great thing is at this stage, it doesn't take away from any additional growth. But maybe a younger guy will probably benefit from doing them first or while fresh. Just an example, if I personally walk in fresh and cold on a leg day and I start doing RDLs, I'll probably end up working up to 4 plates aside for my working weight. Now, nothing's wrong with this, but to get there, I'm gonna need a ton of warm-ups, especially if I'm doing it first. In doing so, that creates a higher stress for the joints and the entire body. Now, what I'll typically do is all of my leg workouts first, and then I'll finish the workout with RDLs at the end. Currently, I'm even doing deficit RDLs, so this will actually reduce the load even more. But while I'm still doing these with 3 plates, the key here is that I'm super warm by the time I get up to them. Now, arguably, I'm getting even more out of the lift by doing it this way. I'm using an increased range of motion when my body is primed to handle it, which is at the end of the session. Now, the last one is rest days and recovery. When I was younger and I was looking to build my base, my mindset was different. The question was, how can I create the greatest stimulus I can in the gym? The bigger the stimulus, the more frequent the stimulus, the bigger and stronger I grow, the faster. And thinking this way and doing it, it did pay off big time. But recovery, it was an afterthought. The way I thought about it was that as long as I can recover in time for the next session to train hard, that would be the extent of my recovery. Now, that mindset doesn't fly. The shift from how do I create the biggest stimulus to how do I ensure my greatest recovery between each session. In my 20s, it was stimulus over recovery. At 36, it's recovery above all else. I know how to train hard. I know I'll create a stimulus each session, but I need to recover from it, or it's all wasted. Or even worse, it's setting me back if I'm under recovered. So what I do here now is I set my training days in place first. Then I work backwards. I used to say, how many days per week do I want to train chest? 2? Okay, I'll train chest on Monday and Thursday. How many days per week do I want to train back? 2? Okay, Tuesday and Friday. The rest of my body parts would go just like this. Now, my first question is, how many hard sessions can I realistically cover from in a week? 5 might be the absolute max. Maybe 4 hard training sessions and 1 not so demanding. Or maybe training 2 days on, 1 day off repeat. Doesn't matter. Whatever it is, now I set that as the limiter. Then I take whatever body part frequency I can to fit that mold. I take the work that needs to be done and prioritize it. This ensures that the work that I'm doing has recovery built into it, prioritizing that recovery above everything else. And guess what? If you know how to train hard, the stimulus really isn't limited here. Now, this doesn't just apply to older lifters, just because you're over a certain age. If you've simply just been training for a long time like me, and you've racked up years of wear and tear, this is something you should probably be doing. Now, a lot of guys think that bodybuilding past a certain age is very different. It's really not. It can be, but it's also different even at a younger age if you have lots of experience, especially if you have lots of mileage racked up over the years. And if that's you, you probably want to implement some of these ideas. And the truth is that the overall approach that I am using now is pretty different than what I did early on. But I'll never change what I did earlier to build that base because it worked very well. But it would just be stupid on my part to still try to progress the same way I did early on when I was 14 to even 24 years old. And if you need help with your training, diet, and your overall approach to building muscle, I'm helping guys just like you every day maximize their results with my online coaching. If you're interested in learning more, simply send me an email, peter@oldschoolmassgain.com. Send me an email with the words "I'm in" and I'll go over the details with you. But if you want to see more of the best original bodybuilding content just like this, make sure to subscribe.